did there, Patrick. I reckon I only need about 20 odd minutes, and then hopefully there'll be plenty of time for Q&As and whatnot.
Yeah, cool. No, I think we might get started. So for those that don't know Norm, he's been around. Well, I think I met you first at the 2007 Joomla Day that we held in Melbourne.
We all know Norm.
But everyone knows Norm, yeah. So. Your reputation.
Sometimes not always for pleasant reasons, Russell.
I don't know Norm.
There's a few that might pop on later that might not know you, but by the end of it, I'm sure that they'll know that you're someone that can answer questions on Cloudflare, but hopefully you answer most of them in the next hour. And go from there.
Sure.
So I think you've got share screen controls and all the rest of it.
I do. I can see them down there.
Fantastic.
Someone's given me that. So I'll, as I said, for those latecomers, I do turn into a pumpkin at about 7 p.m, so I do need to go. But I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time. I'd rather spend more time on answering questions. As Patrick briefly said, I have been around Joomla since Mambo days, which people like to say. I was also building sites in Mambo days and then built sites in Joomla. Was involved in a number of Joomla days, and more importantly, I've been an IT professional since the late 90s. And I've been building sites since what is sometimes regarded as the dawn of time, which is 1996. And one of the things that my corporate IT career taught me is redundancies, and it's something I've always taken really seriously. And although I don't work in a pure IT role anymore, I'm the general manager of a company, and we're an e-commerce company, so I take still a very much an active role. And one of the things that I'll tell you a quick story about my time with MD Web Hosting. MD Web Hosting was a popular web host for website builders like myself. I made a decision many years ago, in fact decades ago, to move away from shared hosting and have my own server and do my own thing. I always figured I'll learn more and I can get support at 2 a.m. if I need it from me. And MD Web Hosting provided VPSs, and one day sites went down, couldn't access the servers, couldn't access support, nothing. Finally got some words. We were all on Whirlpool back then, communicating with each other, what's going on. And long story short, turned out that they'd gone bust, and their creditors had literally walked in the gates into the front doors and taken the physical servers away. Now, back then I had, on those servers, I had they were also a registrar. So they were my registrar, they were my DNS provider, and they were my web host. And it taught me a valuable lesson in that I couldn't do anything for not only my sites, but my customers' sites. Sorry?
Connected.
Anyone that's not muted to just mute so that we don't have background noise coming in. Thanks.
I couldn't do anything, and it taught me back then that where possible and where it makes sense to try and separate as many of those key elements as I possibly could. So I've always believed in it for a long time now, that if I can have my registrar here, my DNS here, and my web hosting here, I think that's a good plan. It means that if my server falls over, I can change my DNS and point it to a new server. It means that if my DNS falls over, I can change my name servers and point to a new DNS. And basically I have redundancies. I discovered Cloudflare at a time when I was looking for an external DNS host, because Cloudflare is essentially that at its core. Just a quick show of hands who uses Cloudflare. Essentially, Cloudflare is a DNS host at its core. So what that means is DNS is one of those things that old web nerds like me took for granted, but I employed a master's graduate recently, and a smart guy, really smart operator, and essentially I had to explain DNS to them. He's 28 years old, knew nothing, went through Indian university and Australian university, knew nothing. Anyway, DNS essentially you got your name servers, your DNS records, and where do they point to. And so I was looking for a way to separate that out into the cloud. Had to be something that I could access. Cloudflare came along also at a time when I was looking for some mitigation tools for, I was building a lot of sites where people were experiencing high volumes at short notice, and certainly Cloudflare helps in that sense. So at its core, as much as it does other stuff, at its core, it is a DNS cache, an external DNS cache. So instead of your DNS records being on your server or on your web or on your name registrar, you point your name records to Cloudflare, and then you assign your DNS records within Cloudflare. The first thing about Cloudflare is, and I'll share my screen now, is I can't see when you can see my screen. Just give me a nod that you can. Yep, good. In my opinion, the best thing about Cloudflare right off the bat is that, why can't I see that? There you go. Is this here, this free business. The vast majority of the really good features of Cloudflare are completely free. And it's been that way since they started. Their pro plans have changed dramatically in terms of what they cost. They used to cost about $5 a site per month. Or was it $20 for the first one and then $5 thereafter, something like that. But essentially the caching, the DDoS protection, which is distributed denial of service attacks, some of their really good and built-in web application firewall rules are free. Their DNS caching is free. Their always up is free, which means that if your server goes down, it has the ability to at least serve a cached version of your site. If it's a transactional site, people won't be able to make payments or do processes, but at least they won't get a "we don't know who you're talking about" type of page. You'll get a Cloudflare page that has a banner at the top that says, "This site appears to be down. Here is a cached version," so people can still get a response to you. A lot of those features are completely free with Cloudflare. For $20 a month on a pro account, you get a lot more rules in the web application firewall, and a lot more page rules, and some other fancy speed up options, because that's the other element of Cloudflare. I always like to talk about it in that way. As much as there's really, really sexy features of Cloudflare, it is essentially a DNS cache, and a very, very good one. Quick idea of why a external DNS cache is a good thing. If you've ever moved sites, you'll know about lowering your TTLs and that type of thing, and hoping that things replicate. Well, the DNS and the way in which Cloudflare does it, it's instantaneous. It also puts a separation between your visitors, your web server and your websites and your visitors. It puts not a direct connection to those. Cloudflare sits in the middle. So therefore, any traffic coming from your visitors first goes through Cloudflare and then onto your server, which means you can also, I always say this word wrong, obfuscate, i.e. mask your real IP of your server. Your visitors see Cloudflare's server, and your DNS records, in fact, if you do a DNS lookup on it, you're shown Cloudflare's IP addresses rather than your server's IP addresses. Now, why is that important? Because that just puts the baddies one step away from your server. It also means that any attacks, any hits that are happening on your website are first happening at the Cloudflare level, even before it gets to your server. There's always been a lot of discussion about web application or software firewalls for your website. In my opinion, I've never really been a fan of web application, at a web level, at a software level. In my opinion, by the time they're there, if you're trying to fight them off at that level, you're already in a lot of trouble. I'd like to think I run secure servers, or as secure as I can. So that's a level of protection. But then Cloudflare offers that another level back again of trying to push away baddies even before they get to your server. So that's just that quick there, is that the vast majority of the features within Cloudflare are in fact free. So all you can, if you do nothing else than simply use Cloudflare as your DNS host, it's just a great DNS host. It has a lovely interface. It has a really smart way of being able to move a site to it, just a really intuitive way. I won't be able to show you any DNS records of my live sites now because of privacy reasons, but just simply getting a Cloudflare account, you'll go to the DNS records and you'll be able to see what's going on. I will be able to show you other things, but just not that. If we go to, I just wanted to talk about the caching and also what that means potentially for your web statistics. So Cloudflare is also a cache. I'll tell you from first-hand experience, I don't think it's a great cache. It's a good cache and it certainly helps. However, in more recent times, I now use S3 as a CDN and Amazon services. Cloudflare does a great job of caching, static HTML sites, dynamic sites, and the images within it. It will do it, but it's my experience that it's not great. So if you're coming to Cloudflare for its caching features, my experience says that you might be underwhelmed by it. If we just go to, the next thing that Joomla users will want to know is this thing about restoring your visitors' local IP address. So if you're tracking visitors on some type of analytics within your server and or you want logs and or whatever, due to the nature of how Cloudflare works, it will generally store Cloudflare's IP for your visitors' traffic, not the visitor's IP. So there are a number of ways you can resolve that. This particular plugin has been out for forever. From what I understand, it still works. I did quickly research it before I came on. You can see here it only goes up to version 3. That's why I asked who uses version 4. It essentially installs on your site, and it puts a bit of code within the head that tells Cloudflare to use the visitor's IP for and pass that IP through to your web server. Now I couldn't verify this, however, I hope you can see that. That bit of code is essentially the code that I'm pretty sure that I haven't even looked into it, that plugin is installing. So on some of our other static sites, and that's just an index page of our an e-commerce site, it essentially tells, as I said, it tells Cloudflare to restore the user's IP rather than use Cloudflare's IP. You can find all this stuff. In fact, Cloudflare has some really good, I've found them before, Cloudflare has some really, really good Joomla pages. Cloudflare has also some great Joomla specific rules, which I'll show you in a sec. I did find that some of the internal links when I was researching that before I came on were broken, but there's a whole blog post on the Joomla extension for Cloudflare. Another thing Cloudflare does really well is gives you very simple SSL. I know that most servers do now as well through OpenSSL and what's the other one called? Anyway, before that happened, Cloudflare, another great feature of it, it offered a really easy way of getting kind of SSL sites. Cloudflare will tell you that under their flexible, what they call their flexible, they'll encrypt from the visitor to Cloudflare, but not from Cloudflare to your server. If you use a full and strict, then it does it the whole way through. We now choose to use Cloudflare certificates because they're quite cheap and it's quite easy to install and quite easy to configure. And in fact, there's nothing to configure anymore. So that's another thing that Cloudflare can do. Cloudflare gets really, really sexy and really handy when you've got people wanting to do bad things to your server or your website. So, I don't know. Oh, that's just the last 24 hours. JavaScript challenge is a great thing. I'll go through that in a second. Country rules, and remember, all of this is happening off your server. So any, attacks on your, even just bot attacks at a country level, for example, on your site is not even getting to your website or your server, let alone your website. Cloudflare will, it has some built-in rules that just work. You can also limit by country, and instead of limiting by country, you can turn on their, I can't demonstrate it, but who did I see had it on the other day? You can turn on JavaScript challenge where it just simply slows down a script or a bot. You've probably all seen it before. In fact, the site that I notice has it on, turns it on the most would be OpenCart, because OpenCart seem to be attacked a lot. So they'll turn on their JavaScript challenge. Every visitor gets it. And it just simply, the JavaScript challenge slows you down, and two, checks that your browser appears, makes it look like you appear as you're a real user, not a bot browser. Now, how we use that is we put that in place for a number of countries. Doesn't really matter what countries, but often the ones with X's at the end and K's in the country code and whatnot. Here's some of the built-in Cloudflare rules, and you'll notice one of them is Cloudflare Joomla. So these are all the rules that Cloudflare have put in there. Now, some of these are shared by mod security as well. But again, remember, this is happening beyond your server. So before a injection or injection attempt at this type gets to your server, you can override any of these. You can turn them on and off. Some of the PHP rules are pretty good as well. There's also WordPress ones, and then you can create your own. And then you can also disable ones that you find are affecting, interrupting with an extension or whatever. There are all sorts of rules that you can create in terms of being able to allow or deny or change a request for certain requests, whether they be from a country or whether they be a type of URL, maybe it's a pattern in a URL or whatever, and you can determine or decide how to handle those, whether to allow or maybe to put up a JavaScript challenge or maybe to block it altogether. I'm just going to 155 rules is those country rules. Yeah. So you'll see that. So here's some blocks. Some of these would have been added automatically based on our login and that type of thing. But here's an example. So for Brazil, we just put up a JavaScript challenge for just this website only. This is our main domain. If I wanted to, I could block it or put up and the JavaScript challenge is just the challenge is actually a reCAPTCHA that asks them to put a quick input, but a JavaScript challenge just checks their browser. Let's move along. I'll come to access in just a second. Speed is fantastic, and just a caveat on speed with Cloudflare. Early on, I think some of the speed functions in Cloudflare actually slowed down our websites in Australia because they didn't have nodes in Australia. I think that's no longer the case, and certainly I find that a lot of the optimization functions of Cloudflare work exceedingly well. And then there was a time when there was a lot of troubleshooting to be done when you started turning these on, particularly the auto minify type of ones. You might be doing it at your web level, that's fine. But particularly that, and also the rocket loader for JavaScript to try and load JavaScript much faster. Some of those used to be quite challenging to get set up on a Joomla site when I first started using it, but it's no longer the case. So that's that. And Access, we use Access a whole lot. I won't scroll down probably past there. What it does, essentially what it does, it allows you to tell Cloudflare that any URL that ends in whatever, and let's say it's administrator, you first of all have to authenticate to that via, and your authentication needs to match a domain name of your email address. So they use a Google authenticator. It's the quickest one, either a specific email address, or in our case, our domain's email addresses. Also, you can do it from an IP address if you've got a static IP address at home. And it's just a great way of being able to protect certain areas of your site really simply. It works really, really well, and it's quite smooth and well integrated in that sense. And then page rules. Now, page rules are all sorts. Page rules at free level, I think you only get 3, but you can buy more. Page rules allow you, they're very much like a htaccess file, if you all use the htaccess file to redirect traffic here and there, except they're just a lot easier to use. And also, they don't break other stuff. They allow you to turn features of Cloudflare on and off according to patterns in the URL or where you do or don't want them to go. A couple of last ones, and then hopefully we'll get into some Q&A, is the custom pages. Now, we only have the always online configured, but you can configure your own custom page, which has to be hosted externally. So an IP block page is an example. Let's say you had a lot of traffic from certain countries you didn't want, but you wanted to direct them somewhere else. You can, every time there's a country block, you could have an external page which tells them, I'm sorry, you can check our distributor in France or whatever. I don't know, I'm making stuff up. There is an offline one. And again, this all happens at a DNS level, way beyond your server. I was saying before that adding a new domain is very, very easy. The amount of data and resources that Cloudflare saves your server is extraordinary. And then, goodness forbid, when the day comes that you ever have to hit that button there, which turns your all your pages to a JavaScript challenge, chances are, if you ever had to hit that button because you were under attack, chances are Cloudflare is probably already protecting you in a DDoS sense. But it's also, it allows you to separate your traffic from your server and concentrate on what's going on. I've been using Cloudflare now for quite a long time, and now in our business we use it for all of our domains. And as I said at the start, if for no other reason other than just a really, really nice, simple way of being able to get one of our junior staff to manage our DNS records, it's brilliant at that. As I said, I'm not going to go into the DNS page, but trust me, just go and get a free account. Put some domain that you have lying around, and you'll see how the DNS works. You can also, when you add one of the DNS records, you can also choose to turn the core, or in fact all the Cloudflare functions on or off just with a click. So it purely becomes DNS. That's it. So I'm not sure what Patrick told you you'd be all getting this, but I'm very happy to answer more questions and also give you my experiences on certain things. But I'm more than happy to answer more questions and go into more detail. And if anyone's got any questions.
Norm, occasionally, Nathan here, how you going?
G'day, Nathan, how are you?
Not too bad. I have used Cloudflare following your recommendation. Actually, remember I was looking for the service that would do C names as A records, basically.
Yes, yes.
And that worked beautifully for that, and I can confirm that the DNS interface is a pleasure to work with.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It is.
Just one thing I've noticed on a couple of sites I visited, and I'm just wondering, is this when you're in that under attack mode? Occasionally I visit the website where it'll come up with a little Cloudflare thing and little dots going across and saying checking DDoS or something.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's the challenge. The JavaScript challenge will have it will have a recapture box as well. And a word of warning. Some of the, and I'm trying to think I actually think it might be some of Peter's extensions. Every now and then, if one of our staff is working remotely, which we all have been, and they'll do something, they'll get, it might even be just saving, I can't remember. Maybe it was saving products on OpenCode. Anyway, and they'll get that input, that recapture input, because Cloudflare's determined that the string that's being passed in the URL looks dodgy. That might be perfectly fine. So it's not like it's breaking the URL or whatever. It's just simply it wants you to either confirm you are a person and therefore click this thing, or as Nathan was talking about, the challenge alone is just simply looking at your browser, your history, what type of browser it is, whether it looks like there's a person on the other side or is it just a bot. So yes, Nathan, that's generally Cloudflare that you're seeing, and you know, different.
If it was Cloudflare, I just wondered if that's activated by turning on that I'm under attack option.
Well, it is, but you don't have to turn on the online attack. You can just turn it on for certain pages and or certain countries and or certain patterns in a URL or whatever.
June Shaper must get hacked a lot.
Look. A lot of those big sites, it amazes me. I mean, a lot of big sites, Cloudflare isn't the only one of its type as well. But yes, so it would, there was famously in the news a number of years ago, I think it was ISIS that was being protected by Cloudflare, and Cloudflare was getting a bad rap for it because it was doing its job and not allowing government agencies to attack the ISIS websites. So, where is Cloudflare hosted? Sorry, I'm just seeing these questions. I didn't notice that. Obfuscate, thank you. Do you still keep it as it is? Or do you keep a Kiva Admin Pro on your site? I don't know what a Kiva Admin Pro is, and have you protecting all your, does Cloudflare do it all? So because it's very difficult to get to an administrator page of one of our important sites, I don't worry about that. And I've got other server protections. So again, I've never considered, and I know I'm gonna upset people because I've done it in the past. I've never considered any of those web level tools of any benefit whatsoever.
Yeah, that's what admin tools is. It's a website level firewall. It does actually work, but you're still taking the hit on your site rather than at the higher.
Right. Yep. I use SiteGround for my hosting as Cloudflare option. So what that is that's instead of that code and the plugin that I talked about earlier on, that Cloudflare mod Cloudflare it's called. It's a server level plugin that they'll install, and therefore all you have to do is activate that, and the client original IP will be passed through. That's what that does. So, but that still doesn't mean you don't still need a Cloudflare account. Maybe I've seen it before where maybe that you can create the account from within the SiteGround cPanel interface. Maybe, I don't know.
SiteGround's a Cloudflare partner, so there's partner opportunities that mean that.
Yeah, and they've probably got a sign up page within it.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. Should I just take advantage of the opportunity? Well, again, they've proven over a long time now, they are such a reliable DNS cache and a reliable first level defense as well, that I would never not use them for my for any domain. And remember, even just simply that, moving your name servers to Cloudflare, and when you sign up, you'll get a somewhat unique, not entirely unique, bunch of people use the same name servers. I think mine is jobs dot something or other, and Ben at Cloudflare. So that becomes your and the days of me wanting to make sure that all my sites had our own name servers. There's a bit of ego, I think. Don't worry about that now. So that they get pointed to your their name servers get changed at your registrar level, and then you start configuring your DNS records. Cloudflare has nodes, access points in a few locations, right? So, Martin, where's Martin? Didn't even see him.
He's off screen.
Oh, there he is. Didn't even turn his camera on, rude bugger. Do they, Martin? How many? Oh, there he is. How many, Martin? How many?
A lot. I mean, globally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in Oz, 1 in Auckland, 1 in Fiji.
Yep.
Lot in Europe, US. I mean, everywhere.
Yeah. Look,
100 apparently.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned it before. I can remember when Apple TV first put a node in Australia. I didn't have to load my movie 2 hours before I wanted to watch it. It's the same thing with Cloudflare. There was a time early on in Cloudflare where it was possible that by turning on the caching, you actually slowed down your site.
Yes,
so
you had to go overseas to get the traffic to come back.
Correct,
whereas
exactly.
Now, they've even got a node in, I shouldn't say this, they have a node in Adelaide. So, if you've got South Australian customers, they'll get faster response times.
Would Cloudflare compound this? Okay, so many of these emails fall into the spam folder receiver. Okay, so for Glenn, Cloudflare is only handling your DNS and your web activity. You're talking about whether or not your email transports that are going to the visitors are then getting labeled as spam. My encouragement for you and the community groups is to quite seriously stop using your server to send mail. Stop doing that. Use a proper mail provider, such as MailChimp or whatever, because you will find that problem will almost disappear overnight.
And if there are emails that are coming to and from the website specifically, rather than newsletters,
okay. Well then that may simply be an issue of misconfiguration on your SMTP.
Or SPF records.
Or SPF records. And so the other part of your answer, Glenn, thank you, is that within DNS of Cloudflare, you can configure all the DMARC records, all the text records, all the SPF records to your heart content. You can, and it's all, the interface is once again beautifully laid out and very easy. And the, there's another thing I just saw, and the documentation.
It's faster.
Huh?
It's faster. So the time to live, you don't need to wait for the DNS to update. If you're already pointing at Cloudflare and you change SPF, DMARC, blah, 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 MX records, whatever, bang, immediate. You don't have to wait 4, 6, 10 hours to propagate, which is brilliant.
It used to also be that the number of hops that you ended up taking was much less as well. So therefore, your routing of your traffic was much faster. There's been recent changes where other things have improved to make that less dramatic. So to Glenn, yes, what Martin's saying is absolutely true. The changes you make on the DNS changes in Cloudflare are instant.
Excellent, thank you.
Glenn also went to got to use the dev mode.
So I use mailtester.com, which I've just put in, which is a tool that you send your newsletter to, and it will tell you whether it's going to score a higher spam score.
Yeah.
Things like that. For a couple of my clients, we're also using Amazon's simple email service to do the mass mailing out, so that it's not coming from the server.
Yeah, but just coming back to that, Glenn, the more I think about it, you're absolutely right, Pat. What you said is that it probably really is a DMARC and an SPF record issue that you have there that needs to be configured at a DNS level. I don't have time to go through it right now, but DMARC, you need to research what DMARC records you need and also what SPF records you need, because they are the way servers determine between each other who should be allowed to send from your domain. And right now, the receiving email server says to your server, hey, are you allowed to send, is IP address 123.456 allowed to send on this domain? And if your records don't reflect that, then it can't approve it.
Excellent, thanks for the tip.
No problem.
A side note on that, if you're using something like RS Forms or any other forms component, you're sending an admin email to your site users, but you use the from address as the person making the inquiry. You can quite often now find that your server might stop that delivering to you, especially if it's to a third-party ISP address. So use your, make the user email have make the admin email have a from address that is your domain. So then your server passes the SPF, and then I put the customer's email address into the reply to address. So then when the admin replies, it goes straight to that address. And that gets around a lot of SPF issues nowadays.
The other thing I just reminded myself of before is another thing I love about Cloudflare is that their CEO and their whole senior dev team are so transparent, almost ridiculously so. When the Heartbleed thing happened a few years ago, does anyone remember that? You know, they were caught up in it all. They had a lot of responsibility. Their blog posts afterwards were just blow by blow by blow by blow. You could read, I learned so much during that time. And they have really, really good blog posts. Some that you don't need to know, others you'll learn from, and others are them being transparent about how they do things, you know, and I love that about it. I'm just looking at a couple here now that I didn't even know about, that they've also, does anyone remember OpenDNS? Does anyone remember that?
Yeah.
OpenDNS was a really simple service that allowed you to change your local DNS settings to 203.67.222.222. Yeah, I still remember it. And your DNS lookups were done through OpenDNS, which was faster, more secure, and also allowed you the ability to do some simple child protection, a few things like that. Cloudflare released their own not so long ago. It's called Warp. Is that right? Is it? Anyone used it? Yep, and it's their IP addresses. I seem to recall there's a lot of ones in there. But anyway, Cloudflare Warp, if you check that out, that's another nice little, again, completely free thing they do. I think they probably have some paid versions of it. But, and look, the reason I think they can give a lot of their stuff for free, if I just quickly share my screen again, is, and I know this, I read, what is this bit over here, where large organizations are paying them buckets of money in order to protect their networks and their sites. So they're not scrapped for cash, you can assure of that. So that's why all their basic free functionality is essentially free. Sorry, all their basic functionality is essentially free. It lifts up in performance as you go through. We don't have any business accounts, but we have a number of pro accounts. That gives us more, it gives us more page rules, it gives us a few more speed features, and it changes the way you can determine the caching, whether to where the caching is stored. Who else? No silly questions here. Safe zone.
One I haven't put in there yet. So you're saying you don't use Cloudflare now for CDN, you use S3.
Well, it's not entirely true. The Cloudflare cache still works.
Right.
But as far as...
the difference between the Cloudflare cache and specifically pointing to it as a CDN, isn't it?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. So I use S3 now as a CDN, and have been doing that for some time. It's incredibly cheap and it seems to be quite fast.
Yeah. Because you're paying for you're not paying for the actual CDN data transfer, you're just paying for the amount of data you've got stored on S3.
I think that's the way it works, and you also pay for pushes, I think.
Yeah, it's if because I was looking at it the other week, if you're using it for the CDN distribution, the distribution part, so your outgoing traffic, you don't get billed for. Otherwise, you'd be up for thousands of times the amount of data that you've pushed up there. And that makes it usable that way. But if someone was to download from it in a different method that's not the CDN, then that'll spit it out. So does anyone want to need more information on what a CDN part is? Right.
Just on that Amazon, I was about to log in and actually tell you what our last month bill is, because we also use it for backups. So we've been doing this for a while. We have our own little script which backs up our Joomla sites and our OpenCart sites, and it pushes them to which incidentally a Kiva backup has an S3 built-in part, but we just needed one script for the OpenCart sites as well. That's why we made our own anyway, and we no longer, we don't delete anything, and the bill goes up by cents each month. It's just silly. Yeah. So much data there.
I saw you raise your hand, Colin. So basically the CDN is, so at the moment with the concert site, which is what Colin's site is, all of the traffic is being pulled from my server. And so everybody that's requesting anywhere in the world, it has to travel from the server in Sydney to any other part of Australia or the world. If you're using a CDN, then the request goes typically to where it's pointed to, which would be my server. But all of the images and JavaScript and CSS files, if they're using a CDN, a copy of those files is in the points of presence all over the world. So when you use a CDN, it basically takes all of the parts of the site that are high traffic and accesses a copy of them closer to you. So with Cloudflare, if you're in Adelaide and we were using Cloudflare, then it would pick up the images from that copy that's stored on the Adelaide Cloudflare server and then deliver it to you there.
And also reduces your server load at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah, so the particular reason I'm particularly interested tonight in this is that one site the other day decided to do a 24-hour sale offer in a WordPress site without letting me know. And then at 8:30 in the morning, there was enough people causing it to cause a traffic load.
Tip over.
Because the two images at the top of the page were 2 meg each, with 500 people trying to access it at once.
Yep.
It was pushing out all of that in one go. So that's getting a CDN makeover shortly to ensure that it doesn't have that load.
Just on that, Pat, having had some experience in exactly that before as well, one of the strategies I used back then, and we certainly use now, our products sometimes go into Aldi and sometimes we get higher spikes.
Yep.
Also, Black Friday is we sometimes put a static-ish
landing page.
front page. Yeah, we change the front page to a more static page.
Yeah.
And that takes that initial hit that takes it off your SQL server, and just
It's like we're doing a large number of optimizations to the WordPress content after I pointed out why it was falling over. So
yeah, wow. I'd hate to think I could tell you, but no, I wouldn't have to tell you. I think we've got, I'm going to say about like 100 gig stored on our S3 buckets.
Yep.
And last month's bill was $36.
Yep.
And that includes the S3 buckets, us pushing backups for all sites, plus CloudFront, which CloudFront's the CDN.
Yeah.
So that's the transfers as well, the traffic, not just the storage.
Yeah.
Who hasn't thought about using something like a Cloudflare, and what's your stumbling blocks for that? Because I can assure you, if you've ever configured a name server or a DNS record, you can configure this, and it is exceptionally easy to do. And the benefits are almost immediate from a protection point of view. And it's like insurance, isn't it? Right? You never think about it until you actually need it.
I mean, it's something I've been procrastinating on because at the moment my DNS is on my server, and so through WHM. So there's been one occasion on a second server where it was Net Registry's DNS went down for 48 hours, or not probably not that, for 4 or 5 hours a couple of months ago, and that was enough to knock out the sites that were on that server, whereas pushing it onto Cloudflare would change that to make it probably more bulletproof than. So I would imagine Net Registry still has a distributed set of servers, but they're still within the Net Registry.
For sure. Russell, I don't know the answer to that question, but I did just quickly Google, and it would appear as though the Australian Signals Directorate uses Cloudflare, because in their privacy statement, they mention Cloudflare. So, and the other thing I'd do is have a look at their Cloudflare's blog, and you'll probably find that they're very, very forthcoming when they prevent DDoS attacks. That's for sure.
I think you'll also find that some of the bigger American sites look after it, and that could be the Army or Navy, and them use Cloudflare.
Yeah, well,
I'd be surprised.
As I said, Cloudflare is not the only one of its type, of course.
Yeah.
it was the other one in the news just recently. But yes, it's certainly it's done a job for me for a long time, for sure.
Yeah. That was the one that knocked off all the newspapers.
Oh, right, okay.
It went down. Yeah.
I think even, you know, I've run my own server for a long time, and I know how to configure a firewall. Config server firewall is a great product to put on a CentOS machine. But I think it's a great feeling when you turn on some countries and just hit the challenge button and add a heap of countries, knowing that you're almost just going to just do away with some of that traffic, some of that annoying traffic for a while, and just done. Of course, bad guys use VPNs. I get that as well, but you know, it's always a matter of trying to reduce the impact. Jenny, you look like you got a question. No, good. Anyone else? Does anyone think they might give it a go? I'm not paid by Cloudflare, bloody should be. I only recommend it because it just made my life so much easier from the outset, from word go, particularly from a management point of view. I was managing the number of domains when I was in commercial website building. You know, we were managing 250 plus domains, and it was a nightmare, and we were trying to do it. And, you know, that thing about lowering TTLs and that nightmare, and you're trying to launch the new site. Oh, when's Telstra going to update the thing? And Cloudflare just does it so much better.
Yeah, I think I've got to really pick a solution. Whether it's been looking, Google's got a DNS service as well, but like most Google products, it's sometimes a little less UX and more a case of stepping through it with trepidation. So, but yeah, it's interesting you said that you're using CloudFront versus Cloudflare for the CDN. If you don't mind me asking, what's your page or your Lighthouse scores at the moment?
Someone just did it for us again, and I know Lighthouse scores are still relative, but you know, that most of that stuff, unless it's done in Australia, who cares anyway?
No, that's right.
What I can tell you is our first paint is you know, well below a second on all our major sites. Russell, I completely agree with you. I'm old school as well. I remember configuring DNS web proxies in a LAN for staff to be able to use that proxy before their traffic went out there. Can I say that I don't, you know, my thoughts on firewalls on websites. I think they're a complete waste of time. But I still have config server firewall on my server, absolutely categorically. I still do all the things I've done. Cloudflare just adds another you know, another layer in my protection.
It's a service. It's a service solves the problem for you. No problem. I can see that. Definitely. Especially for the sort of operation you're running, because you've got e-commerce wall to wall. You don't want that problem. You got other problems.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And Brett, yes, yeah, there is lots in the package that you can use. And as I said, turning on, it used to be nice when you could buy. I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. You paid $20 for the first site, go to Pro, and that was only $5 each other site. They were great days, but now they changed it. Look, we're a business. It's just a marketing expense, but it's still a pretty cheap shout. $20 for all those extra features you get. Good.
My biggest problem with Cloudflare is remembering to turn off or turn on development mode when I'm in the midst of something, and you're F5, F5, F5. Why isn't I'm sure I got that CSS thingy right. It's Cloudflare. That's right. Yes, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what we do in that sense is we used to turn off. So we'd have a subdomain, a development subdomain, and we'd turn off Cloudflare functions for that subdomain. That was a mistake because when we go live, some of the speed things we wanted to do, we hadn't tested. Now what we do is we just use page rules to turn off the cache. So we still have the subdomain still, doing all its Cloudflare skullduggery, but we just use page rules to, and the page rules, as I said, if you've never used the HTA access file, you won't know my analogy. But if you have, and I'm sure many have, you'll know that sometimes they can get a little unruly. The page rules work in a very similar sense, but also give you the option of turning on and off Cloudflare functions. And a very, very nice interface. The access feature too, that's a beautiful feature. Another paid one, but if you've got a site that you need to protect a certain area and it's a money-making site, then it's just another expense. It's brilliant. It really works. And you can use rules to say if it's coming from this IP address, just ignore it. So, for example, our warehouse has a static IP address. They never get the pop-up.
That's unusual for you, Mick, to be recruiting for Stack Exchange. So there's some questions in Joomla Stack Exchange at the moment that if you've got time, Norm, take a look at.
I love Stack Exchange. I use it for answers all the time. But my days of contributing are long behind me. Not to say I'm not still contributing. I'm contributing tonight. Yeah, I'll have a look for sure, Mick. It is just about to go 7 o'clock. I don't turn immediately into a pumpkin, but I do need to go. Thank you so much. It's good to see the Joomla community still active. We now mostly build e-commerce sites, and I tell you, OpenCart has many challenges. Many, and nowhere near as well organised as Joomla.
It's a can of worms. Always was.
It is. However, we committed to it some time back, and we're yet to find something that's better than it. And I only had a colleague in a similar industry say to me the other day, I'm just fed up with Shopify. I'm just giving them all this money. I'm finally going to go somewhere else. So my open source hat never leaves me. So, but OpenCart's nowhere near as organised as Joomla. It's a little bit. Yeah,
you're right. OpenCart's the best of a bad bunch, and that's the best thing you can say about it.
No, that's exactly right. And look,
it's
we're lucky.
Horrible, but at least you own it.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Russell. And look, we have a good in-house team now, so we can manage stuff on our own. And we're about to move to OpenCart 3, which is exciting. We're in the final stages of releasing the new site now, so that's good.
Is it still a one-man shop? Is it still run by that one guy?
In fact, you're talking about what's his name, Craig. One of their old developers just came back again. There is an active development team, and they did release a few updates recently. To be honest, though, it doesn't bother me anymore. And it's like a lot of my Joomla sites. We have a lot of Joomla sites on our server, but a lot of them are almost just static sites now. And so, whilst we update them, we won't be moving them to 4. And it always gives me pleasure when I find an old site. And I think I showed Woodsy one the other week, an old site that I'd built 14 years ago that still seems to be running along.
It's over well. Well, the other option, Norm, is, as you said, you can turn them into a flat site.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And then move the Joomla site down further, couple of levels lower, change it, make it a flat side again, bring the other side back up the front. Yeah.
Now, I wish there was a re-replacer and a modules anywhere for OpenCart. That'd be lovely. That'd make my year.
Well, they more or less did that with their mod system, pretty much.
VQ mod
it caused as much trouble as the problems it solved, because they keep doing all these breaking changes through their version system.
I love the philosophy of the VQ mod, Russ, and it's terrific. And we in the new version 3, they also have an event one that sits before the VQ mod, and that's very good as well. But I'm talking about just something like a re-replacer, which I use extensively in Joomla sites. It would have been lovely in OpenCart. I couldn't convince Peter. I tried actually. I even offered him money to do one, and he wouldn't do it. Anyway, thank you all.
He doesn't need our money.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. I was one of his first paying customers, you know. I was the one that well, not me only, but there was a number of us that tried to convince him. Peter, we can't do without your site, your extensions. Please charge us so that you can make $1. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Norm.
See ya.
Thanks, Norm.